First off, I don't think enough employers are actually talking to the people that they want to hire. It seems to be that there are a lot of diversity panels. There's a huge elephant in the room. Why don't you go and actually talk to the people that you actually want to, hire? And I think that's the crux of the problem. If you don't communicate, then there's a disconnect. When really they have the chain to connect to it. You just don't use it.
I'd love to pass this question down the panel because we've got such a diversity of experience. What do you think is causing the disconnect, and also please offer potentially some solutions to fight them?
So I think one of the big issues is access, and really it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know, and that still very much drives who gets to even know about these opportunities. I think there's still a massive percentage of jobs that aren't even advertised, and therefore it's kind of, are you already in that kind of world, and therefore can you even know about those opportunities, and then can you access them? And fundamentally the answer is generally no, you can't if you don't know the right kind of people. So I think from an employer's point of view, what we need to be doing, and what we have been doing at Made by Many, is very kind of targeted outreach to communities like Ada's List, to like Hustle Crew, to Mosaic Makers, and people where you've got a kind of community ready made and waiting for you to just feed some opportunities. So just connect with them, and hopefully you can kind of build a long-term relationship as well, and thereby give opportunities to a much wider section of the population.
In terms of disconnect with employers and young people and what's going on, something that an anecdote that I thought was really interesting was about how when Apple created the Health app, there were no women on the development team. So when they actually came out and published this Health app and hailed it as like a flagship, and saying that this is going to be one of the big changes of technology and help you with med tech, etc., a female journalist in the room put her hand up and said, "Does it track your ovulation?" And they said no. So they forgot 50% of the population, which is pretty big. So when employers or individuals or anyone is recruiting, if they don't have somebody in their team who is experienced or is has ideas of how to reach out to the communities that they're trying to get out to, then there's no way that that's going to happen. Everyone, I believe, goes in with the best intentions, but intentions will only go so far. So it's exactly what you both were saying before about actually, you wouldn't know what a 16-year-old would like. You reach out to targeted communities. It's a mixture of knowing your audience, finding out how to get to that audience, and what you can do to make sure that audience not only knows about your place of work or what you're doing, but also feels comfortable with joining. Look at your team, look at your office, look at the people who work in your office, look at your workplace culture and your policies. Do you have flexible working? Do you have different types of workspaces for different types of people? Do you have disabled access? All these things that people were saying, we want a diverse workforce, but are you sort of making yourself welcome to that diverse workforce?
I love that. Do you want to add anything?
I mean, I'm obviously going to echo everything that everybody's said already, but from my experience I've had, so I work at a small charity at the moment, but before that I worked for the Mayor of London, and I designed the Digital Talent Programme, which was basically trying to get more young people from BAME backgrounds, and particularly more young women, into digital tech and creative roles. It was a really interesting process when we went through the consultation with all the employers, and it seems up front that everyone's really up for diversity, and everyone likes to say the word diversity a lot, without actually really understanding what that means. I think we've got into this really kind of dangerous place now where everyone talks about diversity and they just mean gender balance. And it was really interesting when we were trying to really unpick it with the companies and actually just get them to be upfront and talk about things like race and age and sex and all of these other things that they were hugely uncomfortable with talking about. And I think there's lots of companies who are really getting with the programme now, and that's brilliant to see, but it is a bit of a slow burner. But I think, programmes like this, we actually we funded one of these projects, and when I had that moment that Ash was talking about, when I realised when I was designing this programme that I was making decisions about young people, and I'm a 31-year-old woman, and I don't work in the tech sector, and I don't really, don't have that experience. So we actively went out and asked all of the companies we were working with, have you got young people from diverse backgrounds that work in your organisation who can come and be advocates for what we're trying to do? And it was for a couple of reasons. I think it's because it's really, really important to show to other young people that there are people that are within their kind of age range who are doing what they might want to do in the future. But it was also to counteract this argument that's been going around for a long time that you must have more role models in order to get people engaged. My real problem with that is if you don't employ those people and you don't promote them into senior positions, you don't have the role models. So it's kind of a bullshit argument. So I was trying to kind of battle that and basically just provide more opportunities for those companies actually just to engage with more young people face to face and be a bit more open about the struggles they were having in trying to recruit diverse young people. And I think it's still very much a work in progress, but I think things are definitely getting better.
I think you've raised a really interesting point around how important it is for people to be intersectional in their approach to diversity. It's a lot easier to say diversity than to say racism or sexism or Islamophobia, homophobia, etc. So you raise a very good point, and people have to be willing to have very difficult conversations in their workplace if they really want to make progress. And I think that's homework for all of us, to find a way to have a conversation around inclusion without getting defensive and without casting blame, because it's not our fault that the world is unfair, but we are accountable to making it better. I want to kind of flip to the other side of the coin a little bit and talk about preparing young people for work. We've all been involved in that process, and that's really what this is all about. In your view, and I'm going to start with Asher and then kind of move down again, do you think that young people are approaching the beginning of their career with the tools that they need to land a job and then excel once they're in that environment?
No. I wish I had a different answer to that question.
When I was in university, which was, I graduated, 4 years ago? So I saw that there was a huge disconnect between what I was learning. I studied international marketing and Mandarin, and what was actually going on in the industry. And I think that trend seems to be quite common across a lot of industries, particularly tech and the creative industries as well. 10 years ago, a lot of jobs that are commonplace now did not exist. And it seems sort of the industry's sprinting ahead. Usain Bolt, the education sort of system is like the amateur sprinter, sort of trying desperately to catch up, and it's not really going to work. So you kind of have to find a way, okay, look, we have to catch up because it's going to affect us if it gets too far ahead. They have to have a difficult conversation with themselves and say, look, like, why are we not on par with the industry?
Tom Harding's working on one with UCL at the moment, and I think the difficulty is that curriculum design happens 2 years out, and that's just not flexible enough. That's not ever going to be able to keep up. So until you find education establishments actually adopting a much more agile approach to curriculum design and leaving a bit of breathing space and a bit of flexibility within that, it's going to be really difficult for them to ever catch up. And I think in addition to that, partnering with industry to actually create work placements that will give young people a meaningful experience, that's definitely something that needs to happen. I mean, of course, in saying all of this, I'm making a massive assumption that, formal education is the only route into this industry, and it absolutely isn't. And I think that kind of attitude to lifelong learning that you see in a lot of young coders in particular, because there are so many resources that are freely available on the internet, and so young people that are driven by just sheer raging curiosity to make something off their own bat, they're often the people that are now earning millions of dollars in Silicon Valley, because they just started when they were 10 in their bedrooms, and now look where they are, sort of thing. So I think kind of recognising that actually there is that opportunity to develop your skills regardless of what the education route is or otherwise.
I'm often very disappointed by roles that are advertised with a minimum requirement of a 2:1 degree, where I don't feel the degree is relevant at all. I've worked at early stage startups, I've worked at late stage tech companies. Most of the non-technical roles, you can literally learn on the job. If you're bright, if you're capable, you will excel. And I get really frustrated when employers put that, and it's something that I've always argued at the companies that I've worked at, and it's something that I'd love to see change. For people that have been involved in policy on that side, is there anything being done from that level to either change how quickly we adapt curriculum or how quickly education can skill up in the right way with this changing world?
So I'll just kick off with the next strand of the digital talent program that the mayor is running. So you might have heard before, so Catherine created the program and was the mastermind behind it, and she's now left her baby to me. So myself and a couple of colleagues at the GLA are looking after the digital talent program. And the current strand of it is the one that we've heard about this evening about Flipside and Digify and etc. And the next strand that's live at the moment is a higher level digital skills strand with SMEs. So that is exactly looking to address the issues of when it comes to the disconnect between employability skills and technical skills. So the current strand is looking to get skills and training providers to liaise with SMEs and businesses to understand what are your skills gaps, technical and non-technical, what are your core skills, your soft skills, and how can we create and develop a program that's going to be the sort of whole spectrum and that will lead to start to finish of creating a course and to a job. That's something that we're doing at the moment from a policy perspective. Anecdotally, what you were saying before about seeing 2:1 on a job application, I think the same when I see minimum X years of experience, because I don't think you can measure experience. You can have the most intense 6 weeks of your life at a job, and that could be the same as what somebody spent 2 years doing. So it really depends on your projects and your life cycle, etc. And similarly, university and school doesn't always necessarily prepare you for some of the realities of working life. But again, I'd like to flip that and say sometimes employers don't really, aren't very flexible.
That actually goes quite well to the next question I wanted to pose to Catherine around this idea of really starting young and what impact we can make while people are still children. Ultimately, all of us know people even younger than ourselves, whether they're our children, whether they're our relatives, people we sponsor, mentor, care about. What can we then, as supporters or parents or carers, do to support young ambition from a really early age?
Yeah, so I've gone into this new job I'm at now, and I'm working more on kind of formal education, because I think all the stuff that we did at the GLA and is now continue is really, really good in terms of giving people lots more opportunities to go into jobs. But actually, a lot of the problems are stemming from school age. When government brought in the computing curriculum, which replaced the ICT curriculum, loads and loads of girls took ICT, and then barely any girls took computing. So they're not getting those types of skills they need to basically just funnel them into these types of roles anyway. They're not having any exposure to it. And there's very, very little creativity taught in most schools, and creative industries are the biggest growing industry in our nation. But there's lots of issues they're dealing with that stem from technology itself now. I'm sure lots of you will have kids, or you'll have younger brothers and sisters who are suffering from problems that we probably wouldn't have been able to foresee. So there's lots and lots of issues around the rise in cyberbullying, low self-esteem, poor mental health with really young children. Most kids have a social media account in the UK at the age of about 10. You're meant to be 13, and that means you're exposed to all kinds of content that you're not supposed to see and you're not ready to see. And it's really having an impact on young children. And what I found in this work I've been doing recently is the biggest issue, mainly, is actually the parents and the carers and the educators. All the adults that surround a child have absolutely no idea what's going on, and they don't understand it. And I don't blame them, because it is a bit of a whirlwind. Some of the apps the kids get, before it's even been picked up by a school, it's gone viral, and some girl's nude picture's been shared and everyone's seen it. So it's really, really hard for them to keep up. So what I'm now focusing on is actually trying to look at how we support those adults around children to understand what's going on. And the problem is if we don't support those kids to have really healthy, really positive experiences with technology, they're never going to become creative makers with tech, because the adults won't let them or won't want them to do it because it's too risky. So we're at a really crucial time at the moment. I think we've really got to, well, I'm trying on a very small scale to figure out ways to try and tackle that. So, you know, everyone has a better understanding of what tech is going to do and the fact that it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
You know, it is going to change the world. But if, you know, my true belief is if you support all young children to really understand and use tech well, they will do things with tech that we can't possibly imagine, that will improve the world.
You know, it speaks to what Catherine was saying. It's about exposure to technology and kind of familiarising children with it. My daughter learns Scratch at school, which is great, and that's really kind of ignited her interest in coding. And I think, you know, just kind of exposing them to these things so that they kind of understand, you know, oh right, there's such a thing as a developer, there's such a thing as a designer. You know, all these things that surround me all the time, they're actually made by people. And I think through that exposure, they will start to ask questions about, you know, well, what kind of job might I have? And of course, I'm going to point my daughter at data science because there's a lot of money to be made in that.
I love that analogy. You know, diversity isn't whatever, inviting everyone to the party, but inclusion is actually inviting each of them to dance with you. So what advice can you give people in the room, whether they're just a colleague, individual contributor, a manager, to optimize for inclusion in what they're doing in their day-to-day? What advice can you give them? They want to ensure that they're championing it, they're supporting it, they're making the people they interact with feel welcome and equally valued. What advice can you give?
Well, talk to the people who you want in your, or you say you want in your company. Because if you don't do that, then you never find out. You can't mind read, so you've got to talk to them. And also, I just thought of this now, but you were touched on something earlier, Charlotte. Try to change the perception of what you as in whoever the employer is, of what education is. Because, for example, if you said to, I don't know, 100 people, oh, education, you think primary school, you think secondary school, you think university, you think college. But actually, it's life. Trying to get, almost recognizing that everybody has bias and trying to talk to people to try and get over that bias so you can become a better person, your company can improve overall, and the world can be a better place.
Amazing.
I think something that employers can do to be more inclusive is really give people the kind of environment in which they can thrive and where they can be themselves and where it's obvious that they're valued as individuals. And you know, I think that kind of comes from things like autonomous teams and, you know, giving people here's the clear sense of purpose. This is why you're here. Here's the direction. Off you go. Go and do it. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You go and do it to the best of your ability. And I think in doing that, then you basically give people the permission to just be themselves and to pursue things in the way that they see best. And in that way, you as the employer can benefit from that diversity of, you know, of thinking, of experience, of lived experience, whatever it might be. They can bring their whole selves to work, and then, you know, everyone wins.
Thank you. Thanks. I guess from an employer's perspective, it's don't make decisions by yourself. Be consultative when you're decision making, and make sure that the people that will be affected by your decision, whether it's your consumer or your colleagues, are aware and part of the process, and also be transparent in your decision making and what you do. And as an individual, I would say make sure that your voice is heard. Don't feel like you need to, I'm not senior enough, or I'm just the intern, or I'm just the office assistant, or whatever position you are in an organization, you are valued.
I think it's important to know that often, you know, I know there are lots of barriers in the way, but often you can be the person who holds yourself back the most, and you've got to be bold and you've got to push yourself.
Especially as women.
Yeah, absolutely.
How can we enable people with conditions like autism, dyslexia, etc., to work in a creative and tech environment? Who'd like to take that first? Any tips?
you know, if you are autistic or dyslexic, obviously that's a very big kind of general label, and you know there are many kind of there's spectrum within each of those, but essentially there are potentially very particular skills that somebody with dyslexia can bring to the table. So I think it's about employers being open-minded and seeking to understand what the potential is for somebody who's got dyslexia, or what the potential is for somebody who is autistic, and really, you know, working a bit harder actually to understand like how can we bring this person into our workplace.
What cultural change needs to happen in organisations to attract and retain diverse talent? One comes to mind that I'm just going to start with. I think that we still have most workplaces which are very homogenous in terms of leadership. So I think a cultural change that I would like to see is a distribution of decision making, or a diffusion of it.
Well, first of all, I suffer with depression and anxiety, so sometimes I will go into like a shutdown mode. And it's nothing to do with anyone, you know, but you know, for them to understand, look, okay, he's having a bad day, just kind of let him recover. And also, on a slightly lighter note, I'm a morning person, so it's quite late for me. So, for example, like from 8 a.m., I'm up at what, 5, 6, and by like 3, 4, I mean, my brain's going on holiday, you know. But if you're in a quite rigid sort of employment structure, then it's like, oh, you have to work from X time to X time, and you have to do this the same as everyone else. For example, if you're dyslexic or you're autistic, then you're going to have a very particular set of skills that will probably far outmatch everyone in your office. But it's very particular. So then to say, okay, everyone is productive, but in different ways. Okay, cool. You've got dyslexia, but you're really good at this particular thing. Okay, then you're being productive. You've got this. Okay, you're from this particular background, so that means your insight is very valuable because nobody else in the room has been through what you've been through.
Please help me in thanking the panel.